Hey everybody, Onepeg here with another newsy news update. How's everything going? Happy Thursday. Good to see you. So today there was a podcast, and we're going to do a little bit of a recap on some other media that was released not so long ago, actually yesterday, that ties into this. But today the team, well, most members of the team, actually every member of the team minus Anton, so Sigma, Pestily, Veritas, and Ghost Freak got together today with Nikita on Pestily's Twitch channel to have a discussion about all things related to Tarkov and the upcoming 12.11 patch. And I'm going to just play a whole bunch of clips of Nikita and the things that he said as the questions were asked. The first thing that Nikita wanted to discuss was the obvious factory expansion that's coming for 12.11. And on the screen here, I have a piece of the factory map, the current factory map that is taken off of the Wiki. So under here is where the dead scav is for the letter for one of the tasks. This is the catwalk or the raised section here with the blue lockers, and this is the hoppers that are in one of the main rooms, along with the wooded area, the wooden floor area, and the spiral staircase that goes up to catwalk. And right here is the factory offices. Now, in this very first screen cap, we can see that there is the tail section of what looks like the fuselage of a helicopter, a truck, and like an oil bay, and a set of stairs. Now, the vantage point for this is actually taken from right here. So the PMC that is looking at this image is looking from this corner, and he's looking this way. So the fuselage for the helicopter would be right around here. The truck would be right here, along with the oil pits, etc. And then there's this staircase that is running on the opposite side of this room that has been expanded about out to here. This second image that is now taken from the opposite corner of this same wall here, looking this way, we can see that there is, again, the tail section fuselage of the helicopter, and then above it, you have the actual helicopter itself that is crash landed through the ceiling. The other thing that we're starting to notice here is that the floor itself has changed. No longer is there this wood pile, and the barbed wire is now also missing, as is this fork truck. In image 3, we've now moved our position from one of this corner here to now over here, and we're looking back upon the truck and a couple of repair pits that are trenched in the concrete floor below the truck itself, and then there's a bay next to it. Now, this fourth screenshot is where it really starts to get interesting, because we can see very clearly that from the vantage point here of where the PMC is looking down at what was a much smaller wooded room, this area with the pits and the double staircases and all has been completely eliminated. It no longer exists in its current form whatsoever. To bring things even further, this has now been replaced by a very, very obvious, very long ramp that runs in this direction directly down underneath, again, what used to be this small wooden floor room. And also from this, we can see that this room here, instead of being as small as it once was, has not only been expanded outward and over the top of this ramp, but also goes all the way to the wall and creates part of what was just a set of iron rafters that ran over the top of the wall itself. So now this, instead, is our wooden floor room, give or take a few meters. Now this is where the photos really get interesting, because from this vantage point here, where the PMC apparently is standing just in front of this staircase, if it still exists, in front of this dead-end spawn, next to this rubble pile, looking this way, with the two remaining hoppers, it appears, still on his left, we can see that this whole wall has been blown out and is now a portal into a much, much larger area further over from this main room that used to be a border. Now, if we zoom out ever so slightly, we take a look from this blowout here, we can see that this opens up to a much larger square room, kind of like this. And in this next photo, much like the last one, we could see a tent in the corner. Now, in this case, it appears that there's a PMC kind of standing in the center, kind of looking over this way, and that's where we have the tent that's sitting here with hazmat suits and whatnot inside of it. With this next image of the PMC standing here looking out of the tent from inside of it, and you can obviously clearly see the several hazmat suits sitting on the inside. Now, the final photo here is the only one that I'm actually not quite sure of insofar as where it's actually located, because it doesn't give us very many clues. What it does give us, though, is that if we zoom in, we can see up in the corner here, there's a very obvious ramp that runs up and out of this room. It doesn't appear that in this image there's any other exits or entrances. Obviously, this expansion is coming, and we'll take a look at it then. Nikita did end up saying something akin to wanting to lower the pace of gameplay inside a factory, but he wasn't sure whether or not it actually would be.
Gameplay pace will be lowered, I think. But I don't know exactly how it will be. Maybe it will be the same, but at least we will add one more additional spawn of the PMC.
Just in case you didn't catch that, that was Nikita saying that they were also going to add one more additional PMC spawn. Right now in daytime factory, you can only have 5 players in factory at one time. So if you stack a 5-man, you can run through factory in the daytime and clap as many scavs as you see fit. It used to be 6, and then they lowered it by 1. Apparently in the new factory expansion, they plan on adding one more additional PMC to the mix. So it'll be a 5-man plus 1, but still something that would look incredibly farmable. This adds the question of, well, if they're planning on adding a factory boss, which they are because we know this, does that then make the factory boss incredibly farmable? Well, Nikita said that the spawn rate of the new factory boss, which we all know is coming, is going to be a bit reduced. Speaking of the factory boss, here's Nikita talking about what happens when the factory boss gets to you.
Sledgehammer, you will notice this for sure.
Next, other than death.
Insofar as to whether or not the scav boss is going to have minions or not, Nikita said he didn't know. Maybe he will add one in the future, but for now, they want to try and see if he'll be able to hold his own as a solo player. And for those of you wondering, the sledgehammer isn't the only weapon he's going to have. He's also going to have, as it stands right now, a Saiga 12 with drum mags, but no word insofar as to what ammo he's planning on using. My guess is that they'll probably end up stocking him with AP-20 slugs so that he has a little bit more punch than just nearby people. I'm super interested in seeing what happens when he actually gets that hammer onto somebody, because I think that it's going to be making for some serious memes. Oh, and as a side note, they did mention that they wanted to try to give him a Saiga 12 with fully automatic fire, but Nikita said it was too brutal, so he's just going to use semi-auto, I guess. Personally, I'd like to see a variant of the Scav boss that uses a KS-23 and only aims for the knees. Now, on to Scav Karma, which is also something that is planned for 12.11. The way that Scav Karma is supposed to work is it's going to end up having something to do with fence. And Nikita has a bunch of interesting things about how he plans on implementing the way Scav Karma will work.
Now the reputation of fence, and it will be used you will be able to lower it or boost it up.
So if you didn't catch that, Nikita's saying that you'll be able to boost your rep with fence or damage your rep with fence, depending on how you play your scav. Now, he's not being incredibly specific, but we know that he's hinted at things like scavs helping other scavs, not attacking scav bosses. He even went so far as to say if you do attack a scav boss as a scav, the next time that you play a scav and end up coming across that same scav boss, that scav boss will be aggroed toward you. So as it starts off, at the very beginning, it appears that your scav will not end up having scav boss aggro, which enables you the ability to be able to pretend that you're AI, for instance, and not aggro the boss on you at all. In fact, you'd be able to defend them, which would probably generate you some positive rep. Now, what does this all mean? Well, it has something to do with gear.
The gear will be better, and vice versa. If you have low reputation, you will have worse gear.
Now, if you didn't catch that, what Nikita is saying is that your actual scav loadout will be improved overall based on the reputation that you maintain with fence. The higher rep that you have, the better chance that you will end up having superior gear loadouts on your scav, the things that people would really want to have, like an R700 with a scope on it and some tier 4 armor. Stuff like that. Versus the likelihood that with low rep, you would end up getting like a PM pistol and a crappy vest, no armor, no meds, no food, maybe a hunchback. Who knows? But in this case, what he's saying is that the more you act like a good community thespian-style scav or play the way that a scav would be intended on playing, the better your loadouts will be over time. And it doesn't stop there, because what happens with the good rep, right?
The second level of the fence will have the assortment of items, uninsured items that were lost on the location.
So Nikita's saying that fence as a vendor will end up having items that were lost, that were uninsured, beginning at level 2 for purchase from players that have good enough rep. Now that is really interesting because players that die to raiders, for instance, on labs, probably are going to have their stuff end up in Fence's inventory. This obviously incentivizes completely different gameplay from player scavs. So it'll be interesting to see how this ends up actually panning out and whether or not it's going to take several iterations and tweaks as time goes on. Also in 12.11, weapon malfunctions, or the first iteration of them anyway, is going to start being added to the game. In this case, it's not going to be jams, but there will be malfunctions related to weapon misfires, and he said that they're going to take more advantage of the durability system that is built into weapons. Now, yesterday on BSG's Instagram page, they did end up teasing a very, very short video of an AK that is very visibly jamming. So we know that they're working on it. Up next, discussed in this podcast, was an optics rework that Nikita brought to the table in regard to especially eye relief regarding scopes on certain weapons. And we said that the distance for the eye to the sight on all of these guns is supposed to be fixed, but not just that. There's also supposed to be scale standardization that is built into each of the individual optics so that things like MOA measurements or distance to target type of things that people do in real life, depending on what scope they're looking through and the size of their target, those things are also going to be standardized so that different scopes, like what they do right now inside of Tarkov, don't have different size scales associated with them. And for those of you that are wondering, there will be no wipe planned in the foreseeable future, and definitely not with 12.11. Now, for those of you that don't know, historically, the last 3 wipes that we've had have all been somewhere between 200 and 210 days from the wipe before. This wipe has only been around for about 140 days or so, which means that for a wipe, if we were to have it based on that schedule, we wouldn't see one for another 2 months. So unfortunately, guys, we're in this one for a bit longer. Most of the player base at this point in time knows that BSG is planning on or trying to implement at some point in the foreseeable future the idea that Tarkov is supposed to be an open world game. So all of this is supposed to get stitched together, and we're supposed to be able to go to each and every map, most of which will be regionalized, so things like customs and woods will end up being kind of like one giant map altogether. This will also be coupled with portals, different doors that will take us to other locations, or train rides that would take us to different locations, etc., like going to reserve, or in the case of like streets, going to labs. But what I didn't know, and maybe you guys did, maybe you didn't, is that there are going to be multiple portals to get into labs. It's not going to be just Streets of Tarkov. In fact, one of those portals is going to be in the new factory expansion. There is currently a door in the new factory expansion that will end up taking us eventually to labs once that functionality is implemented. So we'll actually be able to see in the new labs expansion this factory door that leads to labs itself, but obviously, as of right now, we won't be able to take it. At some point, though, we will. How cool is that? Sigma asked a question about interchange and the lighting. A lot of the player base has been complaining about how with the changes to interchange that were implemented rather recently, that the lighting associated with interchange itself kind of went to hell. Nikita ended up explaining that they didn't actually change anything physically with the lighting directly. What they did do is they changed how some of the triggers for lighting shifts worked on the map, and that ended up modifying how the lighting on the map was overall. And the team has fixed this lighting problem and made interchange a little bit brighter, so hopefully that ends up kind of alleviating some of the issues. He said that he's not sure if it's going to be for 12.11 or if it's slated for 12.12, but it is on a bulleted list of changes that should be implemented whenever one of the next 2 patches is released. And now we come to Lighthouse. For those of you that are unaware or haven't been really paying attention to this, Lighthouse is slated to be released prior to Streets if Nikita has his way, which means that we're supposed to see Lighthouse before the end of the calendar year. But Nikita thinks that this is going to come a whole lot sooner.
And we really want to release it before the Streets of Tarkov, in the summer.
Sometime in the summer. They're planning on releasing Lighthouse within the next... So summer's over in September. If he's planning on having it released in the summer, that gives him about 3 months from this week-ish. The only issue with this is that the Lighthouse map seems to have suddenly been like a late-stage idea that got added. Now, it's always been something that was on the greater Tarkov map. Lighthouse has always been something that they've wanted to build. But it wasn't really ever mentioned until about a month ago when Nikita said something akin to the fact that he wanted Lighthouse to be released before Streets this year. Nikita saying that he wants it to be done by the summertime is a little bit ambitious, because Nikita also went on to say that Lighthouse is still kind of in its gray development phase, and they don't even have a real fleshed out map as of yet. He even went so far as to say that next week he's looking to sign off on the map itself and the layout of it and where things will be located and how it's going to be laid out. Now, these guys do share intellectual property with Hired Ops, which is a free-to-play game that is in part sharing IP with Battlestate Games. They kind of own little pieces of each other that will probably find its way into a Tarkov map. Obviously, the scale of Tarkov is much larger, but it's one of those things that we're going to have to wait and see. I think that inside of 3 months' time for something that hasn't really been even fleshed out all the way yet and is obviously not being constructed as of yet is a pretty ambitious move. Even though Nikita said that they've increased their staff by about 30% and they now staff about 150 devs. So it's a good move, because when I started playing Tarkov, there was like 20. Much, much better than what it once was. It's just a matter of seeing if they can actually get that job done on that kind of a timeline. Every other map has taken significantly longer to generate than 3 months. Now, the ambitious hope is still, Nikita is still sticking to his guns, saying that he hopes that Streets will be released by the end of the calendar year. We have no idea whether or not that's even remotely possible, but there's a twist.
It's huge, and we will not release the whole location in the same moment. So we have plans to iterationally release it and add like the expansions, a lot of expansions to Streets of Tarkov over next months.
So Streets of Tarkov is not going to be released as one giant map. It's going to be released in chunks, kind of like how they initially released Shoreline, where the resort didn't exist until they added resort onto the end of it. Now, this is something that we haven't heard until today. We didn't know that Streets was going to be implemented piecemeal. Nikita's still sticking to his guns by saying that once the full Streets map is implemented, the plan is to have it support 40 PMCs, which does not include AI scavs, or player scavs. Right now, the most ambitious thing that I can think of in terms of the number of actors on one single map is probably Reserve, which I think at max is probably handling somewhere around 20 to 22. So for Streets to have triple the amount of actors on the map at one point in time, at any given moment in time, is a pretty huge and ambitious deal. I don't think this is something that we'll see at full capacity for a year and a half, maybe even longer. Now, some really quick rapid fire stuff that's going to get implemented. I'm just grabbing my notebook here. There's going to be some streamer items that are implemented. Sigma's having a streamer item that's added. Willers, my boy Willers, Aqua FPS, and Nikita slipped up and called General Sam Colonel Sam, which I thought was hilarious. The panel asked Nikita what he thought his vision was, or what he thought it meant to get good. Nikita said that you need to get used to dying and learn everything there is to learn in Tarkov about loss, which I thought was very good advice. There's going to be a revolver shotgun that we've seen teased before that's going to be added in 12.12. The boss hammer for the factory boss will not be lootable. Arena will not be this year, so get that out of your mind. More smoke grenades will be added eventually, but they're kind of really low on the priority list. There's supposed to be a new Streets of Tarkov trailer at the end of the month. Steam Audio's second module has not had enough testing to be released or implemented for 12.11, and they're planning on 12.12. Customizable rigs may end up being pushed into 2022, but they will be looking at implementing the new body hitboxes before the rig customization part gets added. Hopefully that includes an ear hitbox. Please God. NVIDIA DLSS is being planned for before the end of the year, 12.12 most likely. Veritas ended up making a suggestion where you have a completely randomized scav map. And the idea would be that you'd be able to pick a time, but when you hit go on your scav, you don't get to pick the map that you're going to end up on. It just kind of tosses you into a random one, with the idea being that every scav, most people when they do scav runs try to go to reserve, and every other map, for the most part, is dead. Nikita said he would look into it. No word as to whether or not that's actually going to happen. And last but certainly not least, our man Nikita had this to say about extract campers.
This is life. It's cruel, and this is what we actually want to transceive to the game.
Now, Nikita did say that he doesn't like extract campers. He thinks that the tactic is not nice, but he did also go so far as to say that in this type of an environment, no one is nice, and you're just going to have to deal with it. Now, that being said, he also ended up agreeing with the point that Veritas had made just prior to this, where Veritas said if we add more extracts or give new equipment, like faster acting smoke grenades, for instance, to try to counteract people's ability to be able to extract camp, it won't be necessarily as much of an issue. It will weed itself out as more extracts get added to maps. It hardly ever happens to begin with. If there's more extracts, then there's a less likelihood of people being able to do the extract camping at all. Now, of course, it'll still happen, and people are still going to bitch, but that's Tarkov, so get over it. All right, boys, that's all I got for this one. Thank you so much for your time. I hope you guys enjoyed the video, found it informative, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.